On the line, I have a young man who is currently incarcerated at the Washington Correction Center. Will you please state your name?
My name is Mathew Durham.
Okay, now we did have
I'm
an.
37 years old.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead and explain.
I'm saying I'm 30 years old and I've been incarcerated for 20 years.
Now, we've had an interview before, and quite a bit has changed since then. Would you like to give us an update on what's happened since the last time we spoke?
So recently, I had a resentencing hearing and had my sentence decreased by about 6 years because of my youthfulness when my crime was committed and the progress that I've made while I've been in prison and the things that I've achieved.
All right. You were convicted of a violent crime as a teenager. What advice do you have for
Yes.
today's teenagers?
Well, somebody that was convicted of a violent crime as a teenager, the biggest advice I can give to young people is to try their hardest to think about their choices and not react as fast. The choices that they're going to make today are going to have an impact, either good or bad, depending on how they act in that moment. And as somebody who's an adult now at 37, I don't want to see any more young people come to prison. And more importantly, I don't want to see other people hurt by the actions that they make, and most of the time, split-second decisions.
As you know, one of the big issues in the news right now is gun control. They're stating that if we take assault
Yes.
weapons off the market or if we do more extensive background checks, this is kind of stuff that will help prevent some people from going into schools and to public areas and shooting up folks in a mass quantity. So,
Yes.
based on this information out here, what will more restrictive gun laws help reduce murders in America?
I see the question of more restrictive gun laws preventing more murders is a difficult one to have. And the reason why, like, I understand the importance of felons not having guns. I also understand the universal background checks and not allowing people who are potential risk of violence to have these, like those with mental conditions that may affect their decision making or to certain circumstances. As a means, like, to curtail some murders, but I'm also okay with saying that no one needs 30 round magazines for their guns. I know that, like, a lot of division is, our Second Amendment rights is important, which I understand, and it is important. But I also feel that that right doesn't give you the need to walk down the street with the AR-15 type weapon to prove that you have those rights. You hear people say, like, why restrict them? That guns don't kill people. Well, that's true. A lot of these, like, guns that equip someone with the ability to kill more people, like you said, in mass shootings, and they also put the police at a disadvantage. If you look at the Uvalde school shooting, these officers waited out there for 19 minutes inside the classroom while little kids were being killed. So if the answer is not to take guns away from these type of people, then what are we going to do? Like, the shooter was heavily armed, and their excuse was, we were taking fire, which I understand. But if he wasn't able to have this type of weapon, or with these amount of ammunition or these magazines for this weapon, I don't think that this would have lasted as long. You know what I mean? If he had a regular handgun or something, do you think the police would have been able to react faster and eliminate the situation?
That's a good point. Okay, what could have been done to prevent you from committing the crime that led to your conviction?
Well, since I was convicted as an accomplice, and I take responsibility for my actions and my crime, I don't deviate from my responsibilities, and that I have to pay a penalty for that. I understand that. I think that the biggest thing to prevent my involvement would have been to help me understand my potential as a kid. Had better influences around me. Uh, the school system, and I say is, and I'm not going to say they're at fault for my crime, but I was on IEPs, and they weren't able to give me the attention to help me with the schooling that I needed. So as the time went on, I found myself getting further pushed away from the school and hanging around with people that I shouldn't be. the choices that I made in associates led me to a situation that I saw no way out of, and I didn't stop what happened, and I was charged and accomplice to a murder because of that. Someone lost their life, and like I said, I take responsibility for my actions that hurt not only them, but their family, my family, and society as a whole. The best thing that I can do now is to continue to make positive contributions as a member of society in prison and out of prison.
Now, just to be straight, so everybody understands, you were convicted as an accomplice to a murder. You didn't actually kill anybody, and you've been in prison for 20 years, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Now, what can the penal system do to prevent convicted murderers from returning to prison?
I think that question itself is kind of deters people from the original point of what we should be doing instead of what can we do to stop convicted murderers from coming back to prison. I mean, yes, that's a good thing, but I think it's also what can we do to stop these violent crimes or any crimes from happening. It's also important to understand that murderers have the lowest rate of recidivism. Most of that is because they age out of criminal behavior. When they go to prison, more often they're younger people, and when they're getting out, they're older. They think better. Their actions aren't reacting; they're acting on things instead of reacting as fast. They think about it. They have time to reflect on themselves and become better people. That's why I think it's important. Like I said, instead of saying what can we do to stop people from coming back, which is key, but it's more key to say what can we do to stop people from committing crimes altogether. The second part of it is the vast majority of these mass shootings that are occurring are people who buy these guns legally. So when we have politicians, either, and I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, I go either way, I'm an independent thinker. I think that they twist that issue, where it's like, hey, these felons are shooting things up. These felons are the issue, which felons are part of the gun problem, but it's also to say, hey, people buy these guns legally. I mean, we're not, more often than not, felons aren't shooting at schools or churches and these type of things. And I think those topics get twisted and they get put on people who are black and brown and poor people as these issues instead of saying, hey, what are the real issues behind anybody committing these kind of crimes? Well, there's mental health, economic issues, poverty, and all type of different systems.
Now, how can we protect schools, churches, workplaces, and other public areas from serial killers, people who go in to do a mass shooting?
I think the best way to protect them is to really reiterate to people that if they feel someone's a risk, to talk to them. If you feel that that's not working, take further steps. I don't think people who really care for their loved ones would blame you for talking to someone, even if your thoughts might not be accurate. You know what I mean? If you thought someone was a risk, but they're really not, and you turned them in or mentioned it to somebody who could investigate them a little bit better, I don't think anybody would be mad at you for that, because you really, you're potentially saving lives. And I think that too often people get scared as a label that people will put on them, oh, they jumped the gun on this guy and have the police go search his house or whatever. But like you said, vice versa with this Uvalde shooter, there was warning signs, nobody said anything, and then look what happened. I think that's a key thing is that if you see something or you feel something, then it's okay to step out and say, hey, I think there might be something wrong with this guy or this person or whoever it is. I think that it's also that we've normalized in society violence, and it's delivered to people, more so young people, at such a high rate through YouTube or other social media platforms. And as they understand themselves with their young minds that, hey, violence is okay, or it's not as bad, or whatever their feelings are behind it as a young person, and they're accepting this violence as their everyday life, it's going to be more of an issue.
You did mention that you would like to address people that you see as maybe a threat. Maybe they're putting violent posts on social media, or maybe they're talking to their friends about hating their teachers or their school, and so that would throw up a red flag for you to talk to them. Do you have any idea of what kind of things you would actually say to somebody that you suspect might commit a crime?
I think it would start with, instead of maybe just out there saying, hey, are you thinking about doing something unless they put that directly out there? I think it would be more of, talking to them about their feelings on, hey, what's going on, man? You all right? And it starts with people who really know. Hey, man, I've noticed you've been saying some kind of crazy things on this line. Are you okay? Like, are you thinking other bad things or whatever it is? I think that that's the issue. Just with me being in prison and a long time in prison system changing from how it used to be a little bit more violent than it is now. I think that a lot of times things start and end mainly just off of discussions. Like if I'm able to have a discussion with somebody that might be able to stop something bad from happening versus just letting them run wild. You know what I mean? I think that's a key thing that we have to just get into asking people how are they feeling, are they okay, and if they say they're okay but you still think they're not, then like I said, it's the next step would be, hey, let me mention this to somebody else who might have a little bit more sway to get him the help that he needs or get her the help that he needs right away.
Now, you've been in prison for over 20 years now. So, what is your take on the Washington penal system? Does it look like it needs a major overhaul, or are we doing okay with what we got?
I think as a whole, if you're talking about Washington State prison system, there's different levels, there's different aspects to it. Uh, there's a lot of things that people probably don't know about the Washington prison system, and they think whether I like it or other people like it or not, a lot of people are going to be getting out of prison. And so if you want people to get out of prison, that's the best person they can be. We're talking about people returning to prison because they don't have the uh, mentality or they don't have the tools that they've needed to be able to be the best people they have. Maybe, you only know what you're told or you only know what you're taught. So if you have people come into prison that have never had an education, never really had a job, never had any type of positive role models or situations around their whole life, then you get into a situation where you let them out of prison without any tools to be successful. I think Washington State prison system, they've gotten a little bit better on this, but people don't know. If you had over 7 years to do, you weren't a priority for job, you're not a priority for schooling, you're not a priority for a lot of things. So you might be next on the list for a job or school, but somebody who's been in and out of prison, who's came back to prison for another 3 years, and this is his fifth time, he bumps you down off that list. So if you take a guy that has 20 or 30 years to do in prison and has never had any type of education and they want it, now what are you going now? And you tell them, well, no, we're going to make you sit down for 23 years before you're eligible to actually get education. What does that do for somebody? You know what I mean? What are they doing for the next 23 years until they wait until they're eligible to have a priority status for these classes?
Well, thanks for your time. That was very useful information, and hopefully the public will be able to see that side of the system. Is there anything else you would like folks to know before we end this interview?
I think that what I want people to know is, like I said, if you see something or say something, but also whether what night you're on for prison rehabilitation, if you feel people should be in prison for longer, or you feel people are at risk of getting out, I think that you should look at and say, hey, okay, what can I do to make them better? What can I do to reach out to try to change people from even coming to prison so I don't have to worry about people getting out of prison? Let's stop people from even coming to prison. Not say, hey, you commit a crime, you don't come, but hey, let's stop them before they ever commit a crime. Let's reach out in some way, whatever side of the political aisle you're on. These are things that hit all of us, our family members, our community members, whoever it is. All of us have been affected one way or another by crime.